Everyone, welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. We're back with another great Premier League guest this week. Today we are covering Chelsea as the next team in our State of the Club series this summer, and it's Dávid Pásztor of We Ain't Got No History from SB Nation's Chelsea site. So David, how are you doing? And thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm doing all right, I suppose. Excited for the new season.
Yeah, it's right around the corner. So let's get before we get into the new season, though, let's talk a little bit about last season.
Do we have to?
I know for you and Chelsea fans out there, not the one you want to talk about. Certainly in the last, like, I guess 20 years or so, it's got to be one of the worst seasons that I've seen as a football fan. So from Chelsea,
yeah, I think it's actually worse than 30 years. It's arguably their worst Premier League season of all time. Which, counts back to 1992. So 12th in the league. Can't even really remember last time we finished bottom half of the table. Barely any goals, negative goal difference. It was not great. Getting knocked out of every cup every domestic cup at the first hurdle, and then making it a little interesting in the Champions League, but eventually falling without much fight against Real Madrid. So yeah, not great.
Yeah, I'm not going to make you assess it much deeper than that to save you the agony.
Well, I'm going to turn it around for you guys.
Right.
Hold on.
There's not much more to say. It was terrible.
If this was your worst year in 30 years, I think things are okay.
I mean, I suppose you could say we've been a little privileged or a lot privileged over the last, 20 years with basically unlimited funding. In a way, starting with Abramovich, winning every trophy possible. So maybe it was coming, and it was a nice reality check and getting us to appreciate what we have or what we had. But no, I don't wish it to anybody. I'd rather not have to learn such lessons, if I'm being honest.
Fair enough. No, missing out on Europe is tough, to say the least.
True.
But listen, there has to be some sort of bright spot. Can you name a breakthrough player from last year, one or two? I mean, certainly, I'm sure there's guys that have disappointed or underachieved. So let's start with something that made you smile.
There's a lot of people who disappointed and underachieved, but we bought a lot of players. So there's a lot of young talent, at least on paper. And the one standout to me was Enzo Fernandez. I'm not sure that's not really a hot take, I suppose, only the most expensive player in Premier League history. But, he's super young player, World Cup winner with Argentina. And you often, in the Premier League, you often have a sort of an acclimation period when you come in from another league. But he basically hit the ground running and try to do his best with all the chaos around him. And despite all that, despite being so young, so many changes, he already did really well. So it's exciting to see him settle in, almost starting to live up to his transfer fee and really making it exciting for us, looking forward what he can accomplish. As far as underachieving, I mean, it's really tough to maybe pick one out. But
who disappointed you the most, I guess, is how we'll frame it up.
I suppose if we're going with players, I would have to go with Raheem Sterling, just because he was billed as, in the summer, we looked on him as the signing that will make us finally work on the attacking end in a more consistent manner. He'd done it for years with Manchester City, with Liverpool, and he just was not the player that we expected to get for that much money, for that much hype. Everybody kept saying, whenever any of our three main coaches were asked throughout the season, what's wrong with Raheem Sterling? They just said, well, he's done it for so long. Surely one of these days he's going to start doing it again. And we've yet to see that happen. So I would say he's up there as far as disappointment goes.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's a close contest. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was just going to run down the list of transfers. I mean, Enzo lived up to these are all in euros, 121 million euro billing, yes, I guess, to an extent. But then you go after that. It's Wesley Fofana was 80 million. Murdoch was 70. Cucurella was another 65. Sterling 56. Badashile 38. Koulibaly 38. I mean,
Yeah.
Nick and I are Roma and Lazio fans, and we can't spend that on one player usually in a summer transfer window. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of money that Chelsea threw
It's
around to
it's
fail really was
crazy.
crazy
I'm
last year.
pretty sure we set records for both transfer windows in the amount of spending, totaling at least 500 million pounds. I mean, you can't even wrap your mind around that amount of money. And just the fact that the new owners came in, and in the first year they blew whatever Abramovich had ever spent on the club, which always was looked upon as how dare he spend this much money. These new guys came in and they just started as if it was, spending money as if it was growing on trees. But save for Enzo, and I mean, Badiashile was good as well, and Fofana was good when he wasn't injured, but he was injured a lot. All the other signings just it's kind of flopped, and it's kind of impressive that you could make that many signings and hit on so few of them when it seemed like a good idea at the time.
All right. I'm gonna do my professional spin zone here, where I'm gonna say number one, City was in the league. City is City. Arsenal, very unexpected. I think not very unexpected, but I think they overachieved, overperformed. You can't really, like, a player's worth what somebody's willing to pay for them, right? So if the owner's out willing to spend money, that should be seen as a positive. The fact that these guys didn't come through, I mean, there's a lot of turmoil around. I think the league was improved. I think that there was a lot of turmoil around the club. 3 different managers. I mean, I don't, I get on maybe on one hand, if you're spending 50-60 million euros for a player, they should be able to figure it out. But at the same time, 3 managers throughout the course of the season, you never saw the same starting 11 at any point in time. At least I can't remember the same 11. There's kind of a lot to deal with. I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but I think that the future is probably a little bit brighter.
Yeah, I think more so than even just managers and players was the decision making for the recruitment. I mean, as Chelsea over the last 20 years, I probably couldn't even name all the managers we've had because Abramovich tended to fire them whenever somebody looked at him wrong. So I mean, this was a fairly common thing for us to deal with new managers. What was different in large ways was who was making transfer decisions. So when the new owners came in, they said everything that happened before was not run well. So they just got rid of everybody. And they got rid of everybody who was in charge of transfers, in charge of marketing. And we were in the middle of a summer transfer window. So they said, all right, Thomas Tuchel, you don't like to do this, but we'll make you do this anyway. So tell us some players that you really want. And the players he signed, Sterling, Koulibaly, these guys, they didn't quite work out. And then 100 days later, they said, well, we don't like you, Thomas, anymore. Let's get rid of you. And we'll just do the transfers ourselves. And so the owners who basically had no experience in football really said, let's just spend some more money. And then January came around and finally they've got some sort of structure in place. So there's like 3 different managers, 3 different sets of decision makers, everybody just kind of putting all these random pieces together. And I mean, I guess it's not a surprise that it didn't work out at all. It probably would have been a surprise if it did work out. Yeah. But maybe just the individual skills involved, you would have thought that we would be better than 12th. But I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, for sure. When you see some of the names that finish ahead of Chelsea, the Brentfords and Fulhams and Palaces, like
Perfect
teams
storm.
like that. Yeah. But I think you mentioned like how it was like kind of a mishmash of player recruitment. And that makes sense too, because it doesn't matter how much you spend sometimes because the players get thrown together. They don't gel. Sometimes continuity is the most important thing with teams. And that sometimes leads to more winning than a team that's kind of all-stars thrown together.
I mean, you were asking about like disappointing players, and what was overall disappointing is the core of this team, essentially the same players, won the Champions League 2 years ago. And I mean, winning a Champions League, maybe not as indicative of overall quality as winning a league, because it's a knockout competition, strange things can happen, whatever. But that was a young group, basically. And a lot of those players who were key to winning the Champions League, players like Mason Mount, especially Mason Mount, he comes to mind, but Kai Havertz, these guys, they also just had a terrible season overall. So people who had been there had bad seasons, people who came in had bad seasons, and we're here now.
All right. So to wrap up last year, 3 managers.
Yep.
Now we got Poch coming in. How do we feel about that?
Feeling okay. He's got a very low bar to clear at this point. So it's, in a way, it's kind of ideal for him to come in. I think if he had been appointed at any time in the last 20 years, especially after he was at Spurs, I think the reaction to him would have been a lot more negative just because of the Tottenham association. But he's come in, and the one big knock against him before was that he's not a winner, and Chelsea are winners. But so far, everything he said, he says the right things. We want to win is number one. Style of play, all that development of players, that's all secondary to winning, and that's what Chelsea fans want to hear. And so far, so good. He's gotten the players to run a bit more, get the fitness levels up, and so far the vibes are pretty good. So we'll see.
Yeah, established guy who's got a Premier League track record should I think
Exactly.
do them well. Yeah,
and yeah, he figured out how to deal with drama at PSG. So I think he's got it all so far.
So in terms of now the squad, you have to build a squad for him, and Chelsea has made a few signings. The biggest names confirmed so far are Christopher Nkunku and Nicholas Jackson to hopefully solve that lack of striker center forward that's plagued Chelsea for the last few seasons that you mentioned. No goals last year. I guess we have to mention Nkunku last night. You said got injured in the friendly. You could talk about what you hope maybe out of those two, and maybe what changes if Nkunku is out for a while, and then you could talk about any other areas of need or targets that Chelsea's got right now.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with the Nkunku was that his transfer was actually agreed like back in September. So that was it's one of the good things that the previous mess has managed to get for us. Since then, there's been a new recruitment team put into place who are they come from places like Brighton, and there's some Bundesliga influence as well. And they've gone for less of the marquee names, as we might say. So like somebody like Nicholas Jackson is a striker most of us, I would say, had never heard of before. If you watch La Liga a lot, maybe you saw him at Villarreal last year, but so far in preseason, he's really impressed us with basically everything that a forward needs to do: hold up, play, lead the line, interplay with other people. So those sort of signings are more than welcome. And then the other emphasis that they've been placing their money on has been younger players, like 19, 20-year-olds, signing for either a loan or our owners also acquired a new club now with Strasbourg in France. So they're trying to go the the multi-club route like Red Bull and those guys are going. And so they're spending more money on the younger players as opposed to the established players. And I guess the idea is to grow them into established stars with Chelsea or with Strasbourg or whoever else might come in. So that's been the focus. As far as still needs, just today, I think, it was today. There's been confirmation that we're going to sign Robert Sanchez, who's the goalkeeper from Brighton. So that's to provide some competition for Kepa. Kepa is, as we might recall, he's still the most expensive goalkeeper ever in football, and he certainly hasn't lived up to that fee. But he had a decent season last year, and now we've got some competition for him. And there's a lot of young players waiting in the wings for him, especially Slonina, who's the young American goalkeeper, but he's probably going to go out on loan this season. As the biggest need remaining, I think, is just another central midfielder. We've been basically all summer linked with Moises Caicedo, again from Brighton. I guess I don't know what we're doing with. I was just trying to buy Brighton's players, but that might or might not happen right now. It's all up in the air. But we definitely need a kind of a defensive midfielder. For years, Chelsea were built around N'Golo Kante, who's an amazing player, best in the world. He's now gone, and last couple of seasons he's been struggling with injuries as well, and we haven't really replaced him. I guess you could say you can't really replace him, but we need somebody who's a defensive midfielder. We don't really have a dedicated player like that, so that's our biggest need at the moment.
Yeah, and if Nkunku is out for, say, a couple months or so, something like that, how do you think they deal with that in the meantime?
I am not sure, honestly. There's a lot of young options, and there's a player named Armando Broya who we've looked at as our striker of the future. Before he tore his ACL, another knee injury. He tore his ACL in December, and he's coming back now. Um, People were expecting him to be part of the squad. He hasn't really taken part in preseason, possibly looking at a loan. So maybe we'll delay that one. I think it just depends on how severe the injury is. If it's another, month or two, I think we just deal with it. If he's out for the season or he's out for half season, we've already seen that when we lost Wesley Fofana actually again to another injury, he's basically out for the season with an ACL. They signed, or we're looking to sign another player to replace him, and it looks like that's going to be from Monaco, a guy named Axel Disasi. I don't really know much about him, unfortunately, but seeing that blueprint, I think if Nkunku's out for the season, we might be looking at another big signing.
So. Yeah, and on top of that, a lot of people who have already exited. Mount has gone to United, Havertz to Arsenal, Kovacic to City, all direct rivals. Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek on their way to Italy, and Mendy, Koulibaly, Conte all to Saudi Arabia. I mean, there was a lot of players for not that many positions on the field, so I think some of it's necessary. But you mentioned that defensive mid. Now we're talking about a striker. Who of these guys do you think is the biggest hole to fill?
Well, I would say the biggest hole is Mount, just because he was a homegrown player, and he was and actually he was voted our player of the season for the last 2 years, even if he had a bit of a down year a couple of years ago. So I mean, he's one of those where it's kind of his contributions didn't show up on the scoreboard necessarily, but when he was on, he was the guy who keyed the press, who kind of knitted it all together. And just his dedication, his, running, that kind of stuff, that is something that we would like to see more. A lot of that, I think, will come from coaching now, which hopefully somebody will step up into that role. And it's just like even more so than losing the player himself. It was kind of the emotional, psychological impact of Mount, not only leaving his boyhood club where he's been at since like age 8, but going to, one of our bigger rivals in Manchester United. So that's it's kind of a unique situation for Chelsea in that we might sell players, but we almost never sell to direct rivals, I could say, or you could say other top teams in the league. And this summer we've basically sold one each. So we'll see how that works out for them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about that? Because it's not every day you see that in most leagues, right? Where the big teams sell to each other, like Havertz, Mount, and Kovacic, especially Mount and Havertz, because they're younger and still kind of up and coming. I mean, does that worry you that they might come back and bite Chelsea a bit?
I think Mount is going to come back to hurt us at some point. I think the jury's still out on Havertz. He's such a strange player in a way that it never looks like he's trying that hard. And then sometimes he just does something magical, but he really needs to do something extraordinary for his performances to be noticeable. But I think actually Kovacic at City is going to be an amazing signing for them, because he's such a skillful player, and he won't be asked to do everything like he was asked at Chelsea. He can just concentrate on doing his magic with the ball, and I think that's going to be interesting to watch as a neutral for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and I guess quickly, since we're in the U.S. here, what do you think went wrong with Pulisic at Chelsea? Do you think it was more the injuries, or you think he was over his head?
I'm not sure he was over his head. I think because when he arrived, there's a lot of things conspired against him, including injuries and COVID and all of that happened. Because when he arrived, that was the COVID year, and he got hurt at the same time. But when the Premier League resumed from lockdown or whatever it was called, that was the best period of Pulisic's time at Chelsea. And that was like 2 months, and he was almost like our player of the season. He single-handedly took Chelsea from top half of the table to a top 4 finish. But then I don't know if it was just he couldn't do it with the player, with the crowd, or the extra pressure that the fans being back provided, or just was a victim of his kind of versatility. Because under Tuchel especially, he played a lot of wing back, which, I mean, you don't want Pulisic as a wing back, right? Like, it's just I don't know. It's really tough, and I think it's just a combination of things. And then every time he would have a run in the team, which became less and less frequent as the years went on, but he would get pretty frequent injuries, unfortunately, and that's not something that people generally talk about. But he had his fair share of injuries, more than his fair share, really.
Yeah, I mean, as a U.S. fan, I hope he bounces back at Milan. But you were right for that one period. I remember watching him early on, and you're like, he can handle this. And then a lot of manager changes too, I'm sure, didn't help, and all that.
Yeah, and he never really, like, with the U.S., he's almost always a number 10, right? I mean, we would think that's his best position, maybe wing. But with Chelsea, he played all over the place. He was winger, he was inside forward, wing back, especially. Just not a good look, and not his best position. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate. I was pretty excited when Pulisic got signed, and his first season started slow but ended really well, and then it just kind of just petered out slowly.
Yeah,
so it's probably, I think it's one of those where it's the classic, like, this guy needs a change of scenery to get the best out of him. And I think he's gonna do well in Italy. I think
so too.
Yeah.
All right, and just to put a bow on the transfer window, you spoke a little bit about new ownership in Boehly. Just, I mean, high level, happy, not happy.
The Todd Meister.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, he's not really involved that much anymore, but he was definitely the face of the operation for a long time. The media, especially in England, always needs a face to put on something. So, like, in the previous 20 years, whenever Chelsea did something, it was Abramovich this, Abramovich that, even if he wasn't really that involved. With Boehly, he's not even like the main guy in the consortium that bought the team, but he was the single biggest piece as a individual. So he became the head, kind of the lead, whenever coverage happened. And then he also appointed himself chairman, and then he fired all the recruitment guys, and he said, I'm going to be interim sporting director as well, even though he's never really had any such experience. But, I mean, it's a little classic, American, confidence. We can do this. How hard could this be? And so, yeah, the first few months were not great in terms of just cohesive ideas, what we're going to do with coaches, players, etc. And then about halfway through the season, he slowly started dialing back his involvement as we put actual sporting directors in place. So I think right now is where we should have been probably 12 months ago, if they had come in with a slightly better plan, other than how hard could this be? Let's just get this done, and then we'll see where this takes us. So I think this season will be a bit better gauge of where we're going to be, or the way we're going to do business for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, however long they might be around. We do have to remember that we've gone from a single owner who basically was in it just for the fun of it, to mostly being owned by private capital, who will be looking to turn a profit at some point, despite whatever promises they might be making about, we're here to respect the history and get the fans on board and stuff like that. Eventually they're going to sell. So that will be interesting. And the one big thing that we need them to do, which was promised in the sale, was to renew or figure out what to do with the stadium, and how to either rebuild it stand by stand to bring it up to more modern standards, or knock it all down and build a brand new one. So that's one big task that we don't really know how they're going to handle yet.
Yeah, well, that's a big question mark. And like you said, sure, it's a different type of ownership, right? Abramovich was there for the fun of it. He did a lot of winning with Mourinho and some other guys, and this is a different look ownership now. and what I thought of early on when you're talking about all the money they were throwing around, it reminds me of the Mets here with the new ownership group that they have. They've just thrown tons of money around and it hasn't worked for them either. So just to make like a cross sport reference there. New season
any
begins,
chance
though.
to take a jab at the Mets, right? Go.
Hey, the Yankees aren't doing much better. So new season begins, though. So new hope, right? About a week, just over a week from now. And I believe you guys open with Newcastle, right? Off the top of my head, is it you? Liverpool. I knew there was one. I knew there was a big one early.
Yeah.
Taking the over.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now. I'm ready.
So in terms of that new season, what do you think the club's goals for the upcoming season are? If you ask them behind closed doors, what do you think like ownership is targeting at this point with the new manager after finishing 12th last year?
Oh, I would think they're targeting a top 4 finish. And that's probably going to be the public messaging as well. Nobody's really talked about this. And when Pochettino was asked, he just gave the usual, we have to build the atmosphere and get some momentum going, and then we'll see where it takes us. So he's definitely not promising anything. We haven't really heard from what the owners might be looking to do, not even the usual leaks to the media. Last season they made it pretty clear that they're okay with basically throwing the season away, which was a shocking thing to us as fans. I would think that after spending that much money, losing that much money, going through all this drama, they would realize that you can't really do that in European sports or a team with or a league with a relegation. And then, sponsorships that depend on you doing well. For example, we don't have a shirt sponsor yet for next season, and which starts in about a week. So that's kind of a shocking situation as well. So I would think they realize that you need to be top 4 to get Champions League money, top 6 to get Europa League money at least. So I would think that's our minimum target at this point.
Yeah. All right. How about you personally? What's going to make you happy? Minimum to make you happy.
I mean, I'm always happy, supporting a club. Can't be that bad. As I was reminded 30 minutes ago, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be a fan. So personally, I like to see us do a lot better than we did last year. For me personally, the thing that bothered me the most about last season wasn't necessarily even that we lost a lot of games. It was, especially under Potter, was the idea that this is okay. Like, that's fine. We tried really hard, but we just lost the game. It's all right. We'll try again. That's again basically everything I've known as a Chelsea fan for the last 30 years. Even before Abramovich, Chelsea were dedicated to the idea of winning as an identity. So I like to see that restored, and I like hearing that from the head coach, even if the reality of the situation is also that we have a lot of new players, once again, a lot of young players that need to gel together. And of course, there are, at least 6, 7, 8 other teams who are looking to accomplish the same thing. And many of them are just as well funded, if not these days, even a lot better funded. So it's only going to get tougher.
Yeah, Premier League is deep now. When you talk about finishing top 4, I know in Italy it's tough too, but it's more because teams are equally inconsistent. In the Premier League, it's because so many teams have money now and can really reinforce their roster, like we've seen with Newcastle and some of these kind of. They're not a new kid because they've got history, but the new kid on the block in terms of money, and it makes it really tough.
Yeah, I think they're going to start throwing their money around a lot more than they have been. They try to low key into it. To avoid the attention, but they can certainly wield a lot of big money.
Yeah. So we like to finish these episodes with a little fun buy or sell. First one, Chelsea win a domestic trophy next season under Poch.
I don't quite understand. Do I buy if I agree?
Do you buy them winning either the League Cup?
No, I would not. I would not put any
league.
money on them winning a trophy next year. Although we did win the Premier League Summer Series.
That's it.
Which is apparently a trophy now this year.
You're back.
There you go.
a bunch of friendlies, you get a trophy for it. So there you go. Yeah, no, I'm definitely selling that one. No real expectations of a trophy, unfortunately.
All right. How about this? Buy or sell Chelsea finish the season above Tottenham next year?
Yes, I think that's a buy. I think Spurs overachieved last year, and I would expect in the next month or so for them to lose Harry Kane as well. So if that happens, I think Spurs are going to be back where they belong, which is below Chelsea.
Yeah, if Kane goes, there's no chance they do anything. I don't think
that would be a write-off for them that way right there.
All right, so this next one we had before the injury last night, but we'll reference it. If he's healthy, if he plays the majority this season, do you buy 20 plus goals for Nkunku this season in all competitions?
All competitions? Yeah, I think that's a solid bet. He's even last year when he also got hurt, had a knee issue, he almost got to 20, I want to say, in all competitions.
I think between Europe he did.
Yeah, that's right. And then he still was one of the top scorers in the Bundesliga, even though he missed half the season. So I think he's shown over the last couple of years that he's definitely a consistent goal scorer. And he's also shown in preseason already that he's managed to start creating a partnership with Jackson and a lot of the other players on the team. So I think that's a solid buy.
All right, last one. Buy or sell. Pochettino still manager at the end of the season. We have a one manager season for Chelsea.
Wow, a one manager season at Chelsea. That's a rarity already, but right now I'm feeling very positive about Pochettino. So I would say I'd say that's a buy. His contract is not that long. I would put that in there. You know, there's not much tying him to the club if they want to get rid of him. And they only sacked like 3 managers last year, so like maybe they got it all out of their system now. They've given him all the tools to succeed. So I think it would take something pretty monumental for Pochettino to mess this up.
Yeah.
But you never really know what the results are going to say, and if you keep losing, that's not sustainable, unfortunately. So I would say overall, I'd buy that one.
I think short of losing like his first 7 or 8 games, his leash has to be incredibly long. I can't imagine there's anything that happens that would make them can him.
Potter's leash was long. I think Lampard, who finished up the season, won like 1 game out of the last 13 or something like that. So we've gotten used to this long leash idea. And the schedule to begin after Liverpool is actually pretty favorable. So I think there's a decent opportunity for Pochettino and Chelsea to kind of start the season on a good note, to put together 5-6 wins out of the first 7-8 games. That's a solid start, and we can build on that to at least a top half finish, and that should give him a second season. Yeah, that's the positive. That's a positive approach.
I like it.
Yeah, I can't see it going as poorly as last year. If you look at the odds coming out of Vegas, they're 5th favorites in the Premier League right now. So Vegas sees them being not very far behind United.
Might be a little optimistic, I think. But,
Yeah, I'm surprised they're ahead of Newcastle, actually.
Yeah. So I'll ask the question. We won't get into the odd specifics, but just know Manchester City is a massive favorite to repeat. If you were going to go with another team outside of City, who would you pick to win the Premier League this year?
Oh, can I say Chelsea?
No, you could.
Yeah.
This is the Chelsea episode.
My boy Enzo said that our target is to win the Premier League.
Okay.
So.
You want to hear that from your players, right?
Exactly. It's good to be ambitious. I would say a realistic chance might be Manchester United, just because they showed at times last season they went on a couple good runs. And I think Mount could be a key player for them if they sign that other striker they're trying to sign, who looks like Holland but isn't Holland.
They signed
somebody from Italy.
The guy from Atalanta?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Hoyland?
it.
Yeah,
yes.
Young kid. I mean, he's only like 19 or 20, but a lot of promise.
Exactly. I could see them kind of nipping in there, but after City, it's a pretty big drop. So it's a bit of a free fall at that point.
All right, I like it. We're locking in your official pick, Manchester United plus 1100. You guys heard it here. Kicks and Picks podcast. When it comes true, we're gonna be, hey, we told you. You should have listened.
I mean, it's pretty impressive that Chelsea are not that much worse favored, or whatever the proper terminology is. But yeah, I would not throw money at Chelsea. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's a losing proposition right now.
Fair enough.
All right. So, David, this was great. We thank you for coming on. You gave us plenty of great Chelsea chat here. Tell everybody where they can find your work, and your Twitter and all that good stuff.
Well, don't worry about my Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days. You can find us at weaintgotnohistory.com or weaintgotnohistory.sbnation.com. The greatest Chelsea blog that's ever been and ever will be. Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Thanks again for coming on.
Hopefully with a fun season to follow for both of us.
Absolutely. We appreciate it, man.
We'll be watching old Jose over there in the capital. See what he's up to next.
Hopefully they give him a striker soon.
Let's see if he makes it through the season. I feel like he's much less likely to finish the year.
You never know with that guy.
Yeah.
Somebody will look at him wrong and he'll make some headlines again.
All right, so thanks again, everybody, for listening. We've got Chelsea covered now, along with most of the rest of the top of the Premier League. So check out those episodes if you haven't yet, and we'll catch you again soon.